Hi fans, welcome back to Carl Perza MMA. Carl Perza today with a very special guest. My guest coming off of a big victory, Dana White Contender Series, Week 9, big contest. One of the quickest finishes in show history over Rafael Pergentino. Only took like 15 seconds. He is Mr. Luke Fernandez. Luke, what's up, man? How are you?
What's up, man? I'm doing good. Can't complain.
Absolutely, man. Now one of the newest 205ers to the UFC family. Does this seem real? Has it set in that you're a UFC fighter?
I mean, I feel like not until you fight, under the UFC banner. But yeah, I mean, obviously I got the win, I got the contract, so the mindset is yes, I'm a UFC fighter and all that is going to go into preparation. But yeah, I feel like until I fight under the UFC banner, it'll still kind of be like this is crazy,
Absolutely. That fight was so amazing for you, man. Really quick finish. Walk me through it, man. Going in there, being in there, man. When did you see the opening to land that shot?
I mean, it was really just a basic, 1-1-2, but pulling down that front hand in between, setting up the two. Uh, just one of those things where like I feel like I was still feeling out, but just watching where his hands were and tape and stuff. Uh, me and my pops kind of saw that wasn't like just me throwing straight punches was going to be there. Just setting it up behind a stiff jab. Figured that would be there, but I mean it was pretty quick to the point where it's not like I, you know, knew that opening was there. I was still feeling out, but once I committed, it worked out. So.
What was that moment like, after you with the four other winners, Dana White looking at you, easy decision for him giving you that contract?
I mean, it's one of those things that as a fighter, you dream about and you envision all these different scenarios of that happening and stuff, and then when it happens, I mean, it happens so quick. Not even just saying the fight, like the whole night goes by so quick that like, um, while it's happening, it's kind of just like a blur, and it's super exciting. But now looking back, it was like one of those things that you envision every single way, but then when it happens in like such a a cool way, you're like, this is better than I've ever imagined. So overall, it was just a great experience, and I was really happy with how it all played out.
So many people are watching mixed martial arts in this day and age. UFC almost every single weekend. You have Bare Knuckles, a big thing now, PFL, these other shows. Very few people understand what it's like to be a professional fighter. When you're battling on the regional scene, you're not making Conor McGregor money. A lot of guys have to have those 9 to 5 jobs. You stay up late, you wake up early, you miss birthdays, weddings, Thanksgivings, dinners. You sacrifice everything just for the opportunity to get to the big show. You're at the big show, but the sacrifices are still very much real. What's made you want to stick through this journey for so long?
Just the belief in myself, and having the support system behind me with my family and friends, and my teammates. That's really what's going to keep a regional fighter or a prospect going. And I think those things, and obviously it has to be number one, the belief in yourself and the belief, like your faith, and just what you're doing it for. I think that's the only thing that's going to keep you going in the long run. Uh, and yeah, just sticking to the plan. There's always going to be highs and lows, especially in the regional scene career. Like it's one of those things that's like you said, you don't get a lot of glitz and glamour or anything like that through that whole process. It's kind of just grinding away, and you're only making small amounts of money, and you're still working your jobs, and early mornings, long nights type of thing. But yeah, just keeping that faith that you're gonna get to that spot where you could be making money to change your life and help your family out and stuff. But overall, just the love of the game. There's a lot that goes into this fight business that's definitely not shown. People see UFC fights and they think you just get in there and sling some leather and make some money, but it's a long, grueling process, and the ones that make it there are the fortunate ones in that sense. But everyone that fights and really commits themselves to the sport knows that it's one of those things that's a long process, and it's a long game. It's not like a quick payout. So yeah, that's really the only way to do it is like just keep like your faith and your skills and why you're doing this and your end goal, and then having that support system behind you.
For you, do you feel that fighting is more mental than it is physical?
Um, yeah, I mean, if you're not mentally strong, the fight game's gonna eat you alive. But also, if you don't have the physical abilities, obviously you're not gonna make it far. But something that you can learn throughout, as long as you stay mentally in it. I mean, there's definitely examples of people that aren't the most gifted in this game that, make it to the highest of levels. But yeah, I would say mental is definitely, the most important thing in the long run of this game. If you can't keep it together between the ears, then you're gonna have a lot of issues when it gets to your moment to capitalize and then rise in the ranks and make a name for yourself.
Absolutely. You're such a well-rounded mixed martial artist. Already we see in your CFFC days, we see the striking, we see the wrestling, the jiu-jitsu, all of that. For you, at what point did you really start thinking, if I want to take this next level, if I want to go as far as I can with this, that I be as well-rounded as possible?
I feel like that's something that, like, once you get out of like the amateurs, you get into your first few pro fights. That's something that like has to come to like you have to come to that conclusion, or else you're gonna stay stagnant. You're gonna plateau because at any weight class, like you can't just be a one style, fighter. Those people get exposed, and they get into deep water in certain situations, and they just don't have the skills to get themselves out. So you end up drowning there. So that's, I think, as a pro, once you take it super seriously and you dedicate yourself to being a pro, you got to learn all the disciplines and you got to train them individually and really like dive into them.
Absolutely. Training with Dante Rivera, great name in the sport. How did you find your path with him?
Um, so he was actually at one of my buddies and him were at a mutual friend's birthday party, and my buddy was actually my boss who I was working for at the time, doing roofing and siding, and he just brought up the fact that he's like my buddy, meaning me, uh, was looking to getting into like MMA or trying it out, and my coach Dante was just like, call him right now. And it was on like a Sunday night at like, I don't know, 9 o'clock at night. I answered it thinking it was going to be my buddy, and it was Dante Rivera, and he was like, yo, I heard you want to fight, and I was like, yeah, I would love to train. And he said, I'll see you Monday. And the rest of that, once I went the first Monday, I committed to going there, every day of the week. And it's been like that since 2020, and that was in like July of 2020, right after I turned 25. And that was like my first, dive into really committing to MMA.
Absolutely. It's kind of crazy. I mean, you really haven't been doing this that long. I mean, just turning amateur in 2020, about 5 years now in the UFC. When you first made that decision to do this, did you have a feeling, or would you even imagine 5 years later you'd be a UFC fighter?
No, no. If you're gonna ask at that point when I first started, no. I mean, I was more thinking like, do I even have what it takes to like, you know, like learn all these skills? Because I think realistically that there's like two sides of it. There's a lot of people that have that self confidence right off the rip, and they just believe in themselves. And then there's other people that almost have like that self doubt that they want to like always improve. Not in the sense that they're gonna just like put themselves down and not get better, but they're always thinking they can get better, and like they're not where they're supposed to be yet, and they just keep growing in the sport. And I think I was more on that side of it on the early parts. Like everyone, off rip was saying like, "Yo, your hands are pretty good for like somebody that hasn't been doing it," and like all I could see is like my holes. So I just was so hungry to like improve on those, and even in jujitsu, coming from wrestling, like they're like, "Yo, you're tough as a white belt," and all I could think about is like I have so many holes I need to improve. So for me, it was just like being so hungry to improve rather than like thinking I had the ability to get to a certain spot. And then seeing those skills improve as fast as they did when it comes to jujitsu and like my striking, and like cage wrestling and stuff. That's when it kind of like hit me like, yo, if I really, dedicate myself to this and keep improving on the scale that like on the way I am, I could be pretty good. So it's just like those little small victories like help motivate you to keep getting better and keep improving. And the next thing you know, you're a professional, and then you're undefeated, and then you're in the UFC. That's kind of how it happened.
Obviously, CFFC was such a big promotion for you. What was it like fighting with that promotion? Promotion that's based out of that New Jersey, New York area. What was it like doing those shows with them?
CFFC is a great promotion, and like I tip my hat to them and owe them a lot in the sense of, they give great matchups. They give like there's no easy fights in that promotion. Uh, Rarely do you see like big mismatches. It's usually guys getting the experience that they need to get to the next level. So especially in that sense, like I owe them a lot for building me up as a fighter. Give me the right matchups, give me the tough matchups to test myself, and at the end of the day, as a promotion, they do very well with like making the fighters feel like they're in the UFC or a big fight feel. Everything's super professional, and they definitely go above and beyond for the fighters. So I think that that's what prepared me for like a show like the Contender series and stuff. I kind of felt comfortable. Uh, the weirdest part was being in like the Apex with no fans there. I'm used to. I fought in the Hard Rock where it's been sold out before, and there's like 6,000 fans or 5,000 fans there. So being at that level and then going to something like the Contender series was a switch up in the sense of like it feels like a smaller venue and stuff like that. But I think the CFFC really prepares you coming up the ranks and being in those big shows and making it feel like a big promotion at like the UFC and stuff like that. I think they do a really good job of that, and I can't thank them enough. The owner and president Rob Haydak's been a very big presence in my fight career and has helped me throughout. And we've always had a good relationship, so I tip my hat to him and thank him for so much throughout my career. So yeah, definitely one of those promotions. If you have the opportunity to fight for them, it's going to be the best thing you could do for your career. They definitely give the most to their fighters and put you on a big platform. So it's great.
Following the title defense against Edwards, you found yourself at the Contender. But where were you at when you got the phone call that you were being signed to find the Contender?
I was actually working out. I was doing my strength and conditioning, and my coach kept calling me about possibility of being on there. And he's if you know Dante Rivera, he's a huge personality, and he's very like fast paced. So he's calling me and he's saying like, "Yo, you might be on the Contender," and I'm like, "What?" And I'm like, "When?" He's like, "I'm gonna call you back." I'm like, "Okay, that's a lot to take in." Still trying to get my lift in. Calls me back 5 seconds later. He's like, "Yeah, you might be on the Contender this year at this time, maybe." I got to figure out. I'm like, "Who's the opponent?" He's like, "No idea. I'll call you back." So that went back and forth, maybe 10 calls, and realistically, I got nowhere. It was just basically the same thing. Like, you might be on the Contender. And it wasn't until like a couple weeks later where I got the definite and the date. But that whole experience was cool and also very stressful because they were saying like it might be this date, it might be that date, and that could range from like 2 months. Maybe it was August or maybe it was October. So I in that sense it kind of extended my camp. I was trying to stay ready, thinking that it could be like as early as August or September. So yeah, it was cool, but it was also a lot. But I definitely had one of the most intense and well-rounded camps. Obviously, going to a fight like that, but yeah, it was definitely a wild experience, and I'm glad it played out exactly how it did.
Now, after having officially signed contract with a UFC fighter, do you really feel like now is when where the journey really begins in terms of MMA?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have two careers at that point in the sense of you have your regional pro career, and then you get into the big leagues, and that's like your official start to your journey. So yeah, that's how I'm looking at it, and I just want to cross my T's, dot my I's, and do everything by the book, and start climbing those ranks.
For you, what's the ultimate goal? What are you looking to accomplish in MMA?
Be a UFC light heavyweight champion. That's the goal. Once I set out on the professional scene and fight by fight, that's been what I'm working towards. So to be in I would say in striking distance of climbing that ladder now, it feels good, and I'm very excited.
That 205 division has been a division with a lot of eyeballs on it for a lot of years. Obviously, John Jones, guy a lot of people say is the greatest of all time, had that throne for a very long time. Alex Pereira, more recently, so many killers. What's it like for you knowing that you get to go in there and you get to fight some of the baddest dudes on the planet now in that division?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what every fighter like wants to do, and that's where they want to be, in the sense of you know showing their stuff on the the scene, and being, one of the upper weights, those are always seen as the weight classes where, you say like it's the baddest guy on the planet. So being in that pool of fighters is very exciting, and I'm just very I'm excited to grow my skills and fight by fight show that, and just show that I'm a well-rounded MMA fighter, and I'm just as dangerous, if not more dangerous than anyone in that division. So yeah, it's surreal, but coming up, envisioning what I envision, I expect myself to be here at some point. So it's now, and this is where I kind of put the pedal to the metal and just grow as a fighter and show my stuff.
You fight out the Northeast up in New Jersey. There's a lot of guys from that area, whether it be New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia, that are in the UFC. It really seems like MMA is just a breeding ground in that area. What is it with that area in mixed martial arts? Why do so many guys gravitate to it?
I think this area, like this region of the U.S., is just breeds tough people. I mean, the winters are tough, the weather sucks, shit like that, and I don't know why. Maybe just being by the shore just gives you a little chip on your shoulder. Growing up in New Jersey and stuff, I feel like that's kind of the general consensus of this state. Everyone kind of has a little bit of a chip on their shoulder. They're, a lot of blue collar, hard nosed people over here. So I think that kind of reflects in the MMA scene. And I think it's a lot of people that, live that type of lifestyle, whether it's blue collar or just like self made businesses, small businesses like that. I think that all reflects in where you come from. And I definitely think the East Coast, especially Jersey, that's what we're about. So I think that's why you see that influx of like where like this region in the MMA scene being tough and having a lot of fighters out here, just because there's a lot of tough people here. There's a lot of people that have to grind day in and day out. So it's just kind of in our blood.
We've seen the UFC do shows at Atlantic City, the Prudential Center. For you, is that kind of on the bucket list? Is that one of those ones that you want?
Yeah, for sure. I would love to fight at the Prudential Center or uh, Boardwalk Hall. They've done that show before. So any of those, even in Philly or New York, obviously Madison Square Garden would be sick. That's the dream of mine. So yeah, any of those local venues, I've thought about that in the sense of even when I was a kid, like watching boxing with my dad, just seeing fighters that fight there and like hearing that. I mean, at that point, obviously, in my head, I thought like that's like a untouchable thing. Like, not real humans do that. Like those fighters, when I was watching that at that time, being a young kid, thinking, you know, those people aren't real. Like it's a different level of human. And now that I'm here, it's like I'm gonna be that at some point, and it's gonna be a wild experience to think back to that kid thinking that, and then being that. So that's exciting, and I would love to definitely fight at. It's definitely bucket list items for sure. All those local venues, that are huge in the fight game. So yeah, sign me up for any of those venues.
Absolutely. You just talked about your dad a couple times in the interview. How special, how cool is it that he's been able to be part of your journey?
Yeah, it's one of the coolest things, being able to share that experience with him and having him in my corner. I think it brings it all more first full circle for my family, and as somebody that comes from a very big tight knit family, uh, it's cool because whenever we're at family functions and stuff, like my dad gets to talk about it, I get to talk about it. Everyone's kind of like, living it vicariously through both of us. And I got a lot of cousins and uncles and aunts, stuff like that. So we all definitely radiate that energy, and it's a great experience when we're all together and getting excited for fights or celebrating wins and stuff like that. Uh, it's definitely one of a kind experience when it comes to that. So I'd love having my dad in my corner just because we can train and like different looks and watch film at like it's just way more easy and feels more natural since we've been doing that since I was a kid when it comes to, like watching boxing and stuff.
Absolutely. All right, Luke, before we wrap up here, I want to go through a couple big UFC fights. I want your prediction. Who's going to win some of these big matchups? So this weekend, we got a banger of a main event. Tom Aspinall putting the heavyweight title on the line against Cyril Gahn. Who wins that one?
I mean, I'm predicting Tom Aspinall gets it done, but at the end of the day, heavyweights that both those guys strike. anything could happen. But I think Tom Aspinall is just a more well-rounded fighter. I don't think he has better striking, I would say. I think Cyril Gane is way more, savvy. I think Tom Aspinall has a bad habit of, you've seen him lean back and lift that chin up a little bit, and no one's really caught it clean yet where they, put his lights out. But I think that might happen at some point. But I think Tom Aspinall will take Gane down at some point. So that's my prediction.
November, we got the big MSG card. Co-main events, a big female super fight. Weili Zhang and Valentina Shevchenko. Who wins that?
I think Weili is going to get it done. She's just clean. I think and she's just tough as hell. Not to say Shevchenko's not, but I think Shevchenko might be over the hill or getting to that point. And I just think that Weili is, still got a few years left in the tank of her being just dominant.
Absolutely. Then obviously the main event, that one, 170 title, Jack Della Maddalena, Islam Makhachev coming up, trying to get a second title. Who wins that?
I think it's very hard to bet against Islam. It's very hard. He's very good and well rounded, and obviously his wrestling is top tier, and obviously JDM's bigger, but I don't know if that's going to be enough. I think that the camp of Islam is training for that, and I just think he's going to be, that relentless pressure that we've seen in the past, and I think he's going to get it done through, groundwork. But I also think that opens up striking, so I wouldn't be surprised if there's a little bit of more striking before the takedowns from Islam after he takes him down, first or second round, third round, fourth round, he opens up a little bit more striking. We've seen that in guys like Marab, chipping up Sanhagen. So I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, but I think Islam gets it done.
Absolutely. We just mentioned some of the biggest names in the sport right now. When you're watching the big fights and you're training with some of these big names, does that boost you at all to get any motivation from it?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to, give yourself a realistic look of where you're at and where your skill set's at. Swimming with the sharks is the only way to do that. So if you're not willing to, take, obviously you're not always going to be the hammer in this sport, like especially in the training sessions. If you're not willing to take, some licks and get in there with guys that, have been in the game longer than you and have more skill than you, then you're not going to grow at the rate you should. So that's kind of the only way to really progress. The quickest way in the sport is test yourself with guys that are better than you and learn what you can from them, and then use that going forward. So yeah, I think that definitely motivates me, and it makes me more excited when I train with these guys.
Absolutely. All right, last one for you, Luke. So we're about done with 2025 here. Looking ahead, 2026, big year in front of us. In a perfect world, man, how does the next year play out for you?
I'd love to be super active and have the fights on my contract play out, get finishes, get a point where maybe I could be in the contention for a ranked opponent. I don't know if that's possible after 4 fights, but light heavyweight division is a little more open. So yeah, I would love to get myself to the point where I'm in the talks for that, like, ranked opponent. Obviously, to be entertaining and get myself a bonus, that's always a goal. Especially now I'm at the level where those fight bonuses can, like, change your life a little bit and help you out. So going out there and really just doing what I've been doing, trying to be dominant and climb this ladder that's in front of me, which is now, the light heavyweight division of the UFC. So that's the goal.
Absolutely. Well, Luke, man, thank you so much for taking time out of your night to talk to me, man. Really an honor, and can't wait to watch what you do in the 205 division, my friend.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. That's it for us. Carl Peruzzi is Mr. Luke Fernandez. Thanks for watching, fight fans. Take care.